On Christmas Eve, my future mother-in-law looked my 8-year-old daughter in the eye, pointed to the snow outside, and said, "This dinner is for our family." My daughter stood there holding a handmade gift she had spent weeks making for her, while the man she called her almost dad said only 3 words, "Please, not tonight." What none of them knew was that I was the reason their historic mansion still belonged to them, and sitting inside my purse was a legal notice that could change everything within 30 days. My name is Genevieve Hartwell, and that was the moment I stopped paying to keep their front door open. Chapter 1. The doorway. She dreamed of. I used to believe that if you worked hard enough, loved people sincerely enough, and showed up when they needed you, eventually you would be welcomed into their lives. At 38, I owned a small bookkeeping and tax consulting firm called Hartwell Financial Solutions in Greenwich, Connecticut. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills, helped local businesses stay afloat, and gave me the flexibility to be present for the most important person in my life. My daughter, Sadie. Sadie was 8 years old, with a heart so big it seemed impossible for such a small person to carry it around every day. She loved drawing houses, not castles, not princess towers. Houses. Every notebook she owned was filled with sketches of front porches, dining room tables, and families standing together in doorways. One rainy afternoon, while I was finishing payroll reports at our kitchen table, she sat beside me coloring another picture. I glanced over and smiled. Every person in the drawing stood inside the same doorway. Every person was holding hands, even the dog. I laughed softly. "Why are they always standing in doorways?" Sadie shrugged without looking up. "Because that's where everybody comes home." Something about the way she said it made my chest tighten. A few minutes later, she looked up from her drawing. "Mom?" "Yeah, sweetheart, do you think I'll ever have a big family?" I remember staring at the spreadsheet on my laptop while trying to answer that question. After my divorce in 2018, it had been just the two of us. There were no grandparents nearby, no cousins gathering every weekend, no giant Thanksgiving dinners, just me and Sadie building a life together. "We already have a family," I told her. She smiled. "I know, but a bigger one." That was the thing about Sadie. She never wished for expensive toys. She never asked for designer clothes. She wanted belonging. A few months later, I met Nate Whitmore. The first thing I noticed about him was how easy he was to talk to. The second thing I noticed was how naturally he treated Sadie. We met at a local business networking event in Stamford. I expected another evening of awkward conversations and exchanged business cards. Instead, I found myself sitting beside a man who could somehow make discussions about commercial real estate sound interesting. We talked for nearly an hour. When he asked if I wanted dinner the following week, I surprised myself by saying yes. At first, I kept my dating life separate from Sadie. I had made that mistake once before, but Nate was patient. He never pushed, never demanded, never tried to force himself into our lives. Months later, when I finally introduced them, something happened that terrified me. They immediately liked each other. At a board game cafe, Sadie beat Nate 3 times in a row. Instead of pretending to let her win, he accused her of cheating. She laughed so hard chocolate milk came out her nose. After that, he took us for ice cream, then miniature golf, then school fundraisers, then to movie nights. Before I realized it, he was part of our routine. One evening, while we were driving home, Sadie leaned forward from the back seat. "Can I tell you something?" Nate glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "Depends." She smiled. "You're kind of like an almost dad." The car went quiet. For a second, I thought Nate might panic. Instead, "Almost dad, huh?" "Yeah. That sounds like a lot of responsibility." She nodded seriously. "It is." I remember looking out the window so neither of them would see the tears in my eyes. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine a future that felt bigger than survival. A year later, Nate proposed. And that was when I met the rest of the Whitmore family. The Whitmores were practically local royalty. Whitmore Manor sat on several acres outside Greenwich, overlooking a stretch of protected woodland. The house appeared regularly in charity magazines and historical preservation newsletters. Its owner, Eleanor Whitmore, was one of the most recognizable women in the county. Everyone knew her. Everyone respected her. Or at least they appeared to. The first time we visited the manor, I felt like an outsider before I even stepped through the front door. Everything looked perfect: the landscaping, the stone pathways, the antique lanterns, the carefully maintained gardens. As we walked toward the entrance, Sadie suddenly stopped. A small wildflower had pushed through a crack beside the path. She carefully picked it. "Can I give this to Miss Eleanor?" I smiled. "Of course." When Eleanor opened the door, Sadie proudly held out the flower. Eleanor looked down at it, then at Sadie, then back at the flower. For a moment, I expected warmth. Instead, Eleanor offered a tight smile. "That's very thoughtful." Sadie beamed. Then Eleanor added softly, "We're not really a wildflower family." Sadie blinked. "Oh." She handed the flower over anyway. Eleanor accepted it and immediately passed it to a housekeeper walking behind her. The moment was subtle, small enough that most people would have missed it. But I didn't. Inside the house, things only became stranger. Nate introduced me. "This is my fiancé, Genevieve." Eleanor smiled politely. "Nate's friend." Nate corrected her immediately. "My fiancé." "Of course," she said, yet somehow the correction didn't feel accepted, it felt tolerated. Over the following months, I kept noticing little things, nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, just enough to make me wonder if I was imagining them. Meanwhile, Sadie remained completely enchanted. At school, she started working on a family tree project. One afternoon, she spread construction paper across our dining table. I watched her carefully drawing branches. She pointed at one empty section. "Maybe next year I can put Grandma Eleanor here." I felt my throat tighten. She sounded so hopeful, so certain. I kissed the top of her head. "I think she'd like that." At the time, I truly believed it. Around the same period, Caroline Mercer began calling me more frequently. At first, it seemed harmless: a tax question, a bookkeeping issue, a business expense problem. She owned a boutique interior design business and always seemed overwhelmed by paperwork. I helped because that's what family does, or what I thought family did. Hours turned into days, days turned into weeks. Before long, I was reviewing financial documents, organizing records, and helping her solve problems without ever sending an invoice. Every time she thanked me, she used the same phrase: "We're so lucky Nate found you." I took it as acceptance. Now I know better. One afternoon, months later, I found myself wandering through Whitmore Manor while waiting for dinner. The walls were covered with framed family photographs, generations of Whitmores, birthdays, graduations, anniversaries, weddings, vacations, decades of memories. I stood there studying them one by one, and suddenly I realized something. Every single photograph told the same story. Everyone belonged. Everyone matched. Everyone fit. There was no space for outsiders, no stepchildren, no blended families, no unexpected additions, just Whitmores. I felt a small knot form in my stomach, a quiet warning I couldn't quite explain. Then I heard laughter from the next room. Sadie was sitting beside Nate, teaching him how to draw one of her houses. She looked happier than I had seen her in years. And just like that, I pushed the feeling away, because when I looked at my daughter, all I saw was a little girl standing in front of the doorway she had always dreamed of entering. I didn't realize yet that some doors only look welcoming from the outside. Chapter 2. The family that kept counting. The strange thing about exclusion is that it rarely arrives all at once. Most of the time, it shows up in small moments that are easy to explain away: a missed invitation, a forgotten name, an empty seat. One incident means nothing. Two incidents can be misunderstood, but enough of them begin to form a pattern. And over the next year, that pattern became impossible for me to ignore. By then, Nate and I had been together for more than 2 years. Our wedding plans were slowly taking shape. Sadie had memorized the layout of Whitmore Manor better than some children knew their own neighborhoods. She talked about future holidays there as if they were already guaranteed. I wanted that future too. Which is probably why I kept making excuses for things that should have concerned me much sooner. The first incident happened during the spring recital at Maple Ridge Elementary. Sadie had spent weeks practicing. Every evening after dinner, she stood in our living room rehearsing songs with a seriousness usually reserved for Broadway performers. She knew every lyric, every cue, every movement. 3 days before the recital, Nate promised he would be there. I wouldn't miss it, he told her. Sadie grinned. Really? The next day, Eleanor mentioned she might attend as well. Caroline heard about it and said she'd bring Ethan and Chloe. For an entire week, Sadie floated around the house like she was carrying sunshine inside her. The night of the recital, I arrived early. The elementary school auditorium was packed. Pat de Krantz filled rows of folding chairs. Grandparents carried flowers. Phones were already out, waiting to record. Sadie kept peeking through the curtain. Every few minutes she searched the audience. I knew exactly who she was looking for. 10 minutes before the performance started, she found me in the front row. Did they get here yet? I glanced toward the entrance. No, sweetheart. Maybe traffic. Maybe. 5 minutes later, she looked again. Still nobody. Then the lights dimmed. The show began. I watched my daughter sing her heart out under bright stage lights. She smiled every time she glanced toward the audience. But each time her eyes searched the room, I could see disappointment slowly replacing excitement. When the recital ended, children ran toward their families. Flowers appeared, pictures were taken, laughter filled the room. Sadie walked toward me alone. I wrapped my arms around her. You were amazing, she smiled, but it wasn't her full smile. On the drive home, she sat quietly in the back seat. Then she finally spoke. Maybe they got lost. The way she said it broke my heart. Not angry, not upset, just hopeful, still making excuses for people who disappointed her. Nate called later that night. A client emergency, unexpected meeting, something about a property closing. He apologized. Sadie accepted the apology before I could respond. The problem was that nothing changed afterward. The promises continued. The disappointments continued too. Summer passed. Then fall arrived. And Thanksgiving brought another lesson. Whitmore Manor looked beautiful that year. The dining room table stretched nearly the length of the room. Candles flickered. Crystal glasses reflected warm light. Everything looked like something from a magazine. Sadie wore a burgundy dress she'd picked out herself. She was excited all week, especially because she had helped bake a pecan pie with me. Dinner began normally. People talked, lauded, passed dishes around. Then Eleanor stood to make her annual Thanksgiving toast. The room quieted immediately. She raised her glass. Family always comes first. Everyone nodded. Then she started acknowledging people around the table. Ethan, Chloe, baby Olivia, their achievements, their accomplishments, their futures. She spoke about each grandchild individually, how proud she was, how much they meant to the Whitmore legacy. The speech lasted several minutes. When she finished, everyone applauded. I noticed something almost immediately. Sadie hadn't been mentioned once, not by accident, not because Eleanor forgot. The omission was too deliberate. Sadie lowered her eyes toward her plate. No one else seemed willing to acknowledge what had happened. Not Caroline, not Nate, not even me, at least not in that moment. Because I was still trying to convince myself there had to be another explanation. Later that evening, while everyone gathered near the fireplace, I found Sadie sitting alone in the library. Hey, she looked up. Hi, you okay? She nodded, a little too quickly, then she asked the question I had been dreading. Do you think Grandma Eleanor forgot? I sat beside her. I couldn't answer honestly without hurting her, and I couldn't lie without hurting myself. I don't know. She stared at the floor, then quietly changed the subject. That scared me more than anything, because children stop asking questions when they start expecting the answer. December arrived. The holidays transformed Whitmore Manor into something out of a movie. Garlands wrapped around staircases, trees stood in nearly every room. Lights covered the property. For a while, even I started believing things might improve. Then I saw the stockings. We were helping decorate one weekend. Sadie was carrying boxes of ornaments. Everyone was busy. The atmosphere felt festive, until Eleanor began hanging personalized Christmas stockings over the fireplace. One by one, Ethan, Chloe, Olivia, 3 names, 3 stockings. Then she stopped. The empty space beside them remained empty. I stared at the mantel, waiting. Surely another stocking would appear. It never did. Sadie noticed too. Children always notice, even when adults pretend they don't. She stood quietly for several seconds, then looked away. I approached Eleanor later in the kitchen, trying to keep my voice calm. Was there a stocking for Sadie? Eleanor didn't even look up from arranging serving trays. We shouldn't rush things. I blinked. What does that mean? It means traditions take time. The answer made no sense. Olivia had been born less than a year earlier. She already had a stocking. Sadie had spent more than 2 years trying to become part of that family. She didn't. For the first time, anger began preceding confusion, not because of the stocking itself, because of what it represented. A place reserved for everyone except my daughter. A few days later, Sadie brought home her completed family tree project. We spread everything across the dining table: branches, names, photos, construction paper, glue markers. I admired her work. Then I noticed something strange. One section remained blank. The section labeled grandparents, specifically Eleanor. I pointed toward the empty space. You forgot someone. Sadie looked at it for several seconds, then shook her head. No. I frowned. Why is it empty? Her answer came so quietly I almost didn't hear it. I didn't know if she wanted to be there. For a moment I couldn't breathe, because that was the exact moment I realized the situation was no longer about me. It wasn't about being accepted. It wasn't about family politics. It wasn't about Eleanor. It was about an 8-year-old little girl slowly learning she wasn't wanted. And that night, after Sadie went to bed, I confronted Nate. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Sadie had once asked if she'd ever have a big family. I told him everything: the recital, the Thanksgiving speech, the stocking, the family tree project, every single thing. Nate listened quietly. When I finished, he rubbed his forehead. I know Mom can be difficult. Difficult, the word made me laugh, not because it was funny, because it was absurd. Difficult isn't the problem, he sighed. I'll handle Mom. There it was. The sentence I had heard a dozen times before, maybe more. I'll handle Mom, I'll talk to her, I'll fix it, I'll make it right. Always later. Never now. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then Nate reached for my hand. I let him. But something felt different. For the first time, I noticed how practiced that promise sounded, how automatic, how familiar. And as I sat there listening to him assure me everything would be fine, a quiet voice in the back of my mind whispered something I wasn't ready to admit. He wasn't going to handle anything, and deep down, I think he already knew it too. Chapter 3. The house I saved. The thing about promises is that they sound different when you finally stop hearing them as comfort. After that night at my kitchen table, Nate kissed my forehead, told me he loved me, and drove back to his apartment as if we had settled something. I stood by the window long after his taillights disappeared. The house was quiet. Sadie was asleep upstairs with her family tree project tucked inside her backpack. The space under grandparents still blank. I wanted to be wrong about Nate. I wanted to believe he would finally stand up, finally speak clearly, finally make his mother understand that my daughter was not an optional guest in his life. But some part of me, the part that made a living reading numbers people tried to hide, already knew the truth. This had never been about a stocking. It had never been about a school recital. It had never been about one Thanksgiving toast. It was about the way the Whitmores counted family. And Sadie had never been included in the math. To explain what happened next, I need to go back to April of 2024. It was almost midnight when Nate knocked on my door. Not rang the bell, knocked, 3 sharp sounds against the wood, the kind of knock people use when they are too ashamed to announce themselves properly. I opened the door and found him standing on my porch in a wrinkled dress shirt, holding a thick folder under one arm. His face looked gray, not tired. Jen, I need help. I stepped aside without asking questions. He sat at my kitchen table, the same place where Sadie did homework and where I prepared quarterly taxes for small businesses all over Fairfield County. His hands shook when he set the folder down. What is this? He swallowed. It's the house. Whitmore Manor? He nodded. For the first time since I had known him, Nate looked less like a Whitmore and more like a little boy who had broken something priceless and was afraid someone would find out. I opened the folder. Within 5 minutes, I understood why he was terrified. Within 15, I understood his family had been lying to everyone. Harold Whitmore, Nate's father, had left behind more than memories and old photographs. He had left unpaid property taxes, a second mortgage Eleanor claimed she knew nothing about, a line of credit taken against the estate, several missed payments, and a foreclosure notice. Whitmore Manor had 90 days before the county auction process moved forward. The beautiful historic house on the hill, the one Eleanor polished like a crown, was standing on paper that had already begun to burn. I read everything twice, then a third time. Nate watched me silently. Finally, he said, "Can it be fixed?" I looked at him. Yes, his shoulders dropped in relief, then I added, "But not cheaply." "How much?" I turned one of the pages toward him. $148,500. If you want to stop the immediate foreclosure risk, bring the tax balance current and settle the defaulted loan enough to stabilize the property. He closed his eyes. Mom doesn't know the real number. I leaned back. What number does she know? She thinks it's around 40,000. I stared at him. How does someone confuse 40,000 with nearly 150,000? She didn't want to hear it. That sentence told me more than he intended. I should have stopped there. I should have told him to call a bank, call an attorney, call Caroline, call anyone except the woman he had been dating, the woman raising a child alone, the woman who had spent years building emergency savings because divorce had taught her how quickly stability could vanish. But Nate looked broken, and I loved him. That is not an excuse, it is just the truth. "I can help," I said. His eyes opened. "Jen, I can't ask you to do that. You already did." He reached across the table for my hand. "I'll pay you back, we all will, I swear." I pulled my hand away gently and closed the folder. "I believe you want to, but I don't do money on wishes." The next morning, I called Rebecca Sloan. Rebecca was a real estate attorney in Stamford, sharp, calm, and allergic to family drama disguised as legal simplicity. She had handled several property matters for clients of mine, and she trusted me enough to ask only one question before agreeing to meet. "Is this personal?" "Yes." "Then bring every document and leave your feelings in the car." I tried. I failed. By noon, Nate and I were sitting in Rebecca's office with the Whitmore paperworks spread across her conference table. Rebecca reviewed the records without changing expression, then she looked at Nate. "Your family is not dealing with a little cash flow issue. This is a secured debt problem attached to real property." Nate rubbed both hands over his face. "What does that mean?" "It means if Genevieve advances this money, she should not do it as a gift." I looked at her. Rebecca continued. "Promissory note, deed of trust, recorded with the county. Whitmore Manor becomes security for the debt. If payments stop, Genevieve has enforceable rights." Nate's face tightened. "That sounds extreme." Rebecca looked at him for a long second. "So does asking your fiancé to save your family's historic home with nearly $150,000. He went quiet. That afternoon, Eleanor came to my office. Not Rebecca's mine. She arrived in a cream coat and pearls, looking as though she had been forced to visit a part of town that did not meet her standards. Even though my office sat on a clean, respectable street in Greenwich with a florist on one side and a law firm on the other. Caroline came with her, so did Nate. Eleanor did not sit until I invited her. "This is all very uncomfortable," she said. I nodded. "It is. Harold handled these things. I understand." Her mouth tightened. "I don't like the idea of owing money to someone outside the family." The words landed cold. Outside the family. Nate shifted in his chair. "Eleanor," I said carefully, "I'm not asking you to like it. I'm asking you to understand it." Caroline gave a small laugh. "Genevieve, surely we don't need to make this so formal." I looked at her. "Caroline, this is formal. The county already made it formal." No one laughed after that. They signed 3 days later. Promissory note, deed of trust payment schedule, low interest, 36-month amortization with a balloon option if they refinanced. A standard acceleration clause in case of default. Rebecca explained every page in plain English. Eleanor listened with the expression of a woman being asked to drink medicine in public. When it was time to sign, her hand moved stiffly across the paper. Nate signed next. Caroline signed as a witness to the family acknowledgement, though she kept saying this was all temporary. Afterward, Rebecca filed the deed of trust with the Fairfield County Land Records. I transferred the money, $148,500, most of my safety net. Years of careful saving gone in one afternoon. The foreclosure process stopped, the taxes were brought current, the house remained standing, and the Whitmores went back to acting as if nothing had happened. That was when Grace Holloway warned me. Grace was a CPA, and one of the few friends who could look at me over coffee and say the thing everyone else was too polite to say. I told her everything 2 weeks after the documents were signed. She listened quietly. Then she stirred her coffee and said, "People rarely forgive the person who sees them at their weakest." I frowned. "They should be relieved." "They are relieved," she said. "That doesn't mean they won't resent you." I shook my head. "Nate won't." Grace looked at me with the tired compassion of a woman who had audited too many family businesses to believe in clean gratitude. "I hope you're right." For 4 months, the payments came, not early, not warmly, but they came. Then September arrived, and the payments stopped. The first month, I told myself it was an oversight. The second month, I sent a polite reminder. No response from Eleanor, no response from Caroline. Nate told me he would check. "I'll handle it," he said. By then I should have recognized the sentence as a locked door. In November, I learned he had known all along, not from him, from a banking contact named Jordan Blake, who worked with a local lender and called me after seeing my name attached to a recorded deed of trust. His voice was careful. "Genevieve, I can't discuss confidential loan details, but I can tell you this. Eleanor Whitmore has been trying to refinance Whitmore Manor." I sat very still. To pay me off, there was a pause. Not exactly. What does not exactly mean? It means the application package appeared designed to remove your lien from the conversation as quickly and quietly as possible. My hand tightened around the phone. Did Nate know? Another pause. He was on at least one call. I thanked Jordan and hung up. For a few minutes I just sat in my office, listening to the hum of the printer. Then Caroline called, not to explain, not to apologize, to ask if I could review a sales tax issue for her boutique before the end of the week. I looked at the phone while it rang, and for the first time, I did not answer. The final piece came by accident. Because the truth often walks in through the door, people forget to lock. Caroline had added me months earlier to a group email about holiday planning at Whitmore Manor Flowers, catering, seating, gift bags. I had stopped reading most of it because Caroline sent 20 messages when 3 would have done. One evening in early December, while Sadie was upstairs finishing math homework, my laptop pinged with a new email in that thread. Someone had replied all by mistake. I almost deleted it. Then I saw Sadie's name. Or rather, the absence of it. The email chain included a seating chart, children's table, Ethan, Chloe, Olivia's high chair, 2 cousins from New Haven. No Sadie. Then Caroline wrote, "Are we including Sadie with the children this year, or keeping the family table for Whitmore grandchildren only?" A few minutes later, Eleanor replied, "We tolerate Genevieve because we have to. Let's not pretend the child is family." I read the sentence once, then again, then again. The words did not become less cruel with repetition, they became clearer. We tolerate Genevieve because we have to, because of the money, because of the deed, because I had saved the house they were now using to exclude my daughter. A second message came in, Caroline. Understood. I'll keep the gift bags to the Whitmore kids. I screenshotted everything. Not because I had a plan yet, because that is what I do when a fact matters. I preserve it. Then I walked upstairs. Sadie was sitting on her bedroom floor, cutting gold paper into stars for the card she was making Eleanor for Christmas. She looked up. "Do you think Grandma Eleanor likes silver or gold better?" I stared at my daughter holding paper stars for a woman who had just agreed in writing to leave her out of Christmas. "Gold," I said, because I did not know how to tell an 8-year-old the truth without breaking something in her I could not repair. That night, after Sadie fell asleep, I went downstairs. I opened the locked drawer in my home office for the first time in months. Inside was the blue folder Rebecca had prepared for me. Promissory note, deed of trust, recorded filing receipt from Fairfield County, payment schedule, proof of transfer, 4 payments received, 3 missed. I turned to the extradition clause. The language was dry, plain, almost boring. Upon default in payment, the holder may, at the holder's option, declare the entire unpaid balance immediately due and payable after written notice and applicable cure period. The holder me. For months, I had thought of myself as the woman asking for a place at their table, the fiancée trying to be patient, the mother hoping her child would be loved, but the paper in front of me told a different story. I was not powerless. I had simply been kind, and there is a difference. I closed the folder and sat in the quiet kitchen, listening to the house breathe around me. For the first time, I understood that the weakest person in the Whitmore family had never been me. It was the woman who needed my money to keep her front door standing. Chapter 4. The Christmas Eve testy did not act that night, that matters. Because if I had sent the notice then, angry and shaking in my kitchen, at 1 in the morning, they would have called it revenge. They would have said I had been waiting for an excuse. They would have said money had turned me cruel. So I did what I had learned to do in both business and motherhood. I waited until I could tell the difference between pain and decision. The next morning, I asked to meet me for coffee near my office. He arrived 10 minutes late, already apologizing before he sat down. Client call ran over. I looked at him. For once, I did not soften my face to make his excuse feel less weak. Sadie comes through the front door on Christmas Eve, I said. He blinked. What? She sits at the table with the other children. She opens a gift like every other child in that house. No explanations, no side rooms, no being treated like she is temporary. Nate rubbed his jaw. Jen, no, I said quietly. I need you to listen before you respond. He sat back. This is not about your mother loving my daughter overnight. I am not asking for that. I am asking for basic dignity. I am asking you to make sure the child you let call you almost dad is not humiliated in your house on Christmas Eve. His eyes dropped to his coffee. I waited. That was the thing I had done too many times with Nate. Waited for him to find courage, waited for him to choose words that cost him something. Finally, he reached for my hand. I left mine on the table, still. You know I'm on your side. I felt something in me go very calm. I'm not asking whose side you're on. I'm asking what you're going to do. He swallowed. I'll handle Mom. The words landed exactly where I expected them to. Familiar. I nodded once. Not because I believed him. Because he had answered the real question. After coffee, I drove to Rebecca Sloane's office in Stamford. She had already reviewed everything I sent her the night before. The missed payments, the email chain, the recorded deed of trust. The refinance attempt Jordan had warned me about. When I entered her conference room, a folder was waiting on the table. Rebecca did not waste time. This is a notice of default and intent to accelerate. I sat across from her. She slid the document toward me. The borrowers are in default for failure to make scheduled payments. The notice gives them 30 days to cure. If they do not bring the loan current, refinance properly, or negotiate repayment, you reserve the right to accelerate the balance. I read the first page. Then the second. The language was calm, professional, almost gentle. That made it feel more powerful. I looked up. This doesn't take the house today. No, Rebecca said. And it should not be presented that way. Foreclosure is a process. This notice is not a bomb. It is a legal boundary. A legal boundary. I repeated the phrase silently. I had spent years building emotional boundaries and watching people step over them. This one had a county filing number attached. Rebecca folded her hands. Genevieve, I want to ask this plainly. Are you doing this because of the money or because of Sadie? I looked through the glass wall toward the hallway. A young paralegal walked past carrying a stack of files. Both, I said. But mostly because I finally understand that every dollar I left uncollected became another reason for them to think they could treat us like we owed them gratitude. Rebecca nodded. Then let me handle official service tomorrow morning. I want to give Eleanor the envelope myself. Her expression tightened slightly. Why? Because she made this personal before I did. Rebecca studied me, then she said, fine, but the formal notice still goes out by certified mail and email through my office. What you hand her is a courtesy copy. Good. And Genevieve. I looked at her. Do not argue at the door. I won't. Do not explain the law. I won't. Not threaten. I almost smiled. I know. Rebecca leaned back. Then say what you need to say with your feet. Leave. I took the folder with me at home. Sadie was standing in front of the hallway mirror, wearing her red Christmas dress, the one she had begged me to buy because it made her feel fancy. She held a small wrapped package against her chest. It was a picture frame she had made from craft sticks, gold paint, and tiny paper stars. Inside the frame was a drawing of Whitmore Manor. Every window was yellow. Every person stood in the doorway holding hands. Me, Sadie, Nate, Eleanor, even Caroline and the children. Sadie had given Eleanor silver hair and a pink sweater. On the back, in careful block letters, she had written, Merry Christmas, Grandma Eleanor. She saw me in the mirror and straightened. How does this sound? I forced my face to stay soft. Let's hear it. She lifted the gift slightly. Merry Christmas, Grandma Eleanor. I made this for you. Then she frowned. Too fast? No, sweetheart, it's perfect. She tried it again and again. Each time a little brighter, each time a little more hopeful. I stood there holding a legal notice in my purse while my daughter practiced loving a woman who had already decided she did not belong. That was the moment. Something inside me hardened, not into cruelty, into protection. On Christmas Eve, snow began falling just before dusk, the kind of snow that makes everything look quiet and forgiven. Sadie wore her red dress, red mittens, and black patent shoes she insisted were not uncomfortable even though they clearly were. She held the wrapped frame in her lap the entire drive to Whitmore Manor. Do you think she'll put it somewhere people can see? I kept my eyes on the road. I think she should. That was the most honest answer I could give. Whitmore Manor glowed at the top of the hill. Every window was lit, cars lined the curved driveway. Music drifted faintly through the cold air. For a moment, the house looked exactly like Sadie's drawings, warm, bright, open. We parked near the lower drive and walked up through the snow. Sadie's mittened hand squeezed mine. Mom, I'm nervous. I looked down at her. Why? She shrugged. Just want it to go right. I wanted to tell her it would. I didn't. We reached the front steps just as Caroline opened the door for Ethan and Chloe. The children rushed past us laughing. Carolyn beamed. Merry Christmas, you two. She handed each child a deep green gift bag tied with gold ribbon. Their names were printed on cream tags. Ethan, Chloe, behind them. Another cousin arrived and received the same kind of bag. Sadie slowed beside me, her eyes full of ribbons. I felt her fingers tighten around mine. Inside the foyer, Olivia sat on someone's hip, already clutching a smaller bag with a satin bow. Sadie said nothing. She just held her handmade gift closer. Then Eleanor appeared in the doorway. Pearl silk blouse, perfect hair, perfect smile. The kind of smile reserved for guests who mattered. When she saw me, the smile cooled. When she saw Sadie, it disappeared almost completely. Eleanor, I said. Sadie lifted the gift. Merry Christmas, Grandma Eleanor. I made this for you. She got almost all the words out. Almost. Eleanor placed one manicured hand on the doorframe. It was a small movement, but it changed everything. The foyer behind her was full of people. Caroline stood near the staircase with the last gift bag. Nate was inside, just behind his mother. Thomas Whitmore stood by the hall table holding a drink. Vanessa Reed from the Heritage Foundation turned to look. Several relatives quieted at once. Eleanor looked down at Sadie. Her voice was soft. That was what made it worse. Sadie can wait outside. This dinner is for our family. For 1 second, there was no sound, no music, no laughter, no silverware, just the soft hiss of oven behind us and the sudden silence inside the house. Sadie's hand went still in mine, the gift lowered by an inch, then another. Her face did not crumple. That would have been easier. Instead, she did the thing children do when they are trying not to become a problem. She made herself smaller. I looked past Eleanor at Nate. This was the moment, not later, not privately, not after dinner. Now he had heard her. Everyone had heard her. My eyes held his. I did not speak. I did not need to. His face changed. I saw the conflict, the fear, the calculation. He stepped forward half a pace, then stopped. His eyes flicked to his mother, then to the floor. When he spoke, his voice was low. Jen, please. Not tonight. That was all, 3 words and a surrender. Not tonight. As if there would be a better time for my daughter to be respected. As if dignity could be rescheduled. As if I was the one making the scene. Something closed inside me. Quietly. Completely. I looked down at Sadie. Come on, baby. Eleanor's face tightened. Genevieve, don't be dramatic. I reached into my coat and pulled out the white envelope. Then I placed it in Eleanor's hand. She looked at it. What is this? A copy. Her eyes narrowed. A copy of what? The boundary I should have set months ago. Nate stepped toward me. I took the engagement ring off my finger. His face went pale. I slipped it into Eleanor's palm on top of the envelope. No, he said softly. I looked at him one last time. You asked me not to do this here. My voice did not shake. But this is where you chose. No one moved, no one spoke. Even Caroline looked down at the floor. I zipped Sadie's coat higher around her neck and took her hand again. As we turned away, the warm light from Whitmore Manor spilled across the snow behind us. For a second, our shadows stretched long across the driveway, mine and Sadie's. 2 figures walking away from a house full of people who had spent years deciding we did not belong. Sadie did not cry until we reached the car, and when she did, she cried quietly, as if even her heartbreak needed permission. I started the engine with one hand and held hers with the other. Behind us, Whitmore Manor still glowed like a Christmas card, but for the first time, I could see it clearly. It was not a home. It was just a house with beautiful windows. And I had just stopped paying to keep the front door open. Chapter 5. The papers they forgot. We drove home through streets that looked too peaceful for what had just happened. Sadie sat in the back seat with her mittens still on, the wrapped frame resting beside her like something too heavy to hold. For the first 10 minutes, she said nothing. I kept one hand on the wheel and the other. Around a silence I did not know how to break, then she whispered, "Did I do something wrong?" I pulled into the first empty parking lot I saw. A closed pharmacy, a snow-covered sidewalk, a streetlight flickering over the hood of the car. I turned around so she could see my face. No, baby, you did absolutely nothing wrong. Then why didn't she want me inside? There are questions a mother can answer, and questions a mother has to survive. I unbuckled my seatbelt, climbed into the back seat, and pulled her into my arms. Because some adults are so afraid of what family really means that they hide behind rules and names and old traditions. Sadie cried into my coat. I held her until her breathing slowed. At home, I made hot chocolate the way I always did after hard days, extra marshmallows, too much whipped cream, the kind of small comfort that cannot fix anything but still matters. Sadie fell asleep on the couch under the quilt my grandmother made. The frame she had made for Eleanor sat unopened on the coffee table. At 11:38 that night, my phone began lighting up. Nate, Carolyn, Eleanor, Nate again. Then a number I did not recognize. Then Nate. By midnight, there were 37 missed calls. By morning, there were 82. Not one voicemail began with an apology. The first message from Nate arrived just after 1. Jen, what did you give my mother? Then another. Please call me, she is hysterical. Then Caroline, this is not how family handles things. Then Eleanor, we need to discuss this immediately. I read the messages while standing barefoot in my kitchen, coffee untouched, in front of me. Not one of them asked about Sadie. At 8:15 the next morning, Rebecca Sloan sent the official notice by certified mail and email. Notice of default did it to accelerate. 30-day cure period. The entire unpaid balance could be declared due if they did not bring the loan current, refinance properly, or negotiate a written repayment plan. Rebecca copied me on the email. Her message was short and clean. Formal service has begun. At 8:22, Nate called again. This time I answered. His voice came through tight and breathless. Do you understand what you've done? I stared out the kitchen window at the snow on the backyard fence. Yes, my mother thinks you're trying to take the house. No, Nate. Your family stopped paying a legal debt. Your mother humiliated my daughter in front of an audience. Those are separate facts, but they arrived at the same door. Jen, please, we can fix this. You had your chance to fix this last night. Silence, then he said, very quietly. I panicked. No, you chose, he exhaled. I love you. I closed my eyes once, those words would have reached me. Now they sounded like a key turning in a lock that had already been changed. I believe you love the version of me that kept absorbing the cost. He said my name again, but I ended the call. By noon, Caroline called from a different number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Her voice was unlike anything I had heard from her before, careful, small. Genevieve, I owe you an apology. I said nothing. I didn't realize how much you had actually paid. That almost made me laugh. You signed the family acknowledgement, Caroline. I know, but Nate said it was temporary. Mom said it was more symbolic than anything. $148,500 is not symbolic. She swallowed hard enough that I heard it through the phone. The whole family is meeting tonight. Uncle Thomas is coming. Mom is furious. That sounds like a Whitmore problem. Please come. No, Genevieve, please. If you don't come, Mom will tell everyone you are trying to steal the house. There it was. Not remorse, narrative control. I hung up and called Rebecca. She listened, then said, if you go, I go. I don't want to fight, then don't. Bring documents. Speak once. Leave. That evening, I returned to Whitmore Manor without Sadie. That was the only part that mattered to me. She stayed with Grace Holloway, who fed her pizza, let her watch movies, and told me over the phone, handle the grown-ups. I've got the child. Whitmore Manor looked different when I walked in alone. Not warmer, not grander, just fragile. The family had gathered in the front parlor. Eleanor sat near the fireplace, pale with rage. Nate stood behind her. Caroline sat on the edge of a chair, twisting her wedding ring. Thomas Whitmore, Eleanor's older brother and a retired judge, stood by the window with folded arms. Rebecca entered beside me, carrying a slim leather folder. Eleanor saw her and stiffened. I was not aware this was a legal meeting. Rebecca smiled politely. Given the documents at issue, it became one the moment you opened the envelope. No one spoke. Thomas looked at me. Genevieve, I would like to understand what happened. Eleanor snapped. She is trying to take our home. No, I said. My voice was calm enough that several people looked surprised. I saved your home. The room went still. Caroline looked down. Nate closed his eyes. Thomas turned slowly toward Eleanor. What does she mean? Rebecca opened the folder. She laid out the documents in order. The foreclosure notice from April, the unpaid tax balance, the second mortgage, the promissory note, the deed of trust recorded with Fairfield County, the wire confirmation. $148,500, 4 payments received, 3 missed. Then the refinance inquiry Jordan Blake had warned me about. Finally, the Christmas email chain. Thomas read silently. His face changed before anyone spoke. He looked at Eleanor. You let this woman pay nearly $150,000 to stop foreclosure, then allowed your family to treat her child as if she were an intruder? Eleanor's mouth tightened. That child is not a Whitmore. No, Thomas said, but the debt is. That was the sentence that broke the room. For the first time since I had known her, Eleanor Whitmore had no polished reply, no graceful correction, no family tradition to hide behind. Nate stepped forward. Uncle Thomas, it wasn't that simple. I turned toward him. It was exactly that simple. Last night, all you had to say was, Sadie comes in. That was all. 5 words. His face crumpled slightly. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then I remembered Sadie asking if she had done something wrong. Rebecca gathered the papers. We are not demanding immediate foreclosure. The notice gives your family 30 days to cure the default. You may bring the loan current, refinance with proper satisfaction of Genevieve's lien, or negotiate repayment in writing. But the days of informal silence are over. Eleanor gripped the arms of her chair. You will ruin us. Rebecca's voice stayed level. No, Mrs. Whitmore, your signatures created this obligation. Your missed payments triggered this notice. I looked at Eleanor. I don't want your house. For the first time, her eyes met mine without performance. I want my daughter to stop begging for space in places that were never meant to hold her. No one answered because there was nothing left to say. The consequences did not arrive all at once. They came in the quiet, humiliating ways consequences often do. The Heritage Foundation postponed Eleanor's winter luncheon after word spread that Whitmore Manor had been under secured debt to the woman she had publicly dismissed. Vanessa Reed stopped calling her for committee approvals. Caroline sent me one final email asking for the name of a different accountant. Nate came by my office 2 weeks later. He looked exhausted, older. He stood in front of my desk and said, "I should have chosen you." I looked up from the client file I was reviewing. "No, Nate. You should have chosen what was right." That was the last real conversation we had. With Rebecca's guidance, the Whitmores eventually brought the loan current through a legitimate refinance that acknowledged my recorded lien and paid me back in full, plus interest and legal fees. I did not profit the way angry people online might have wanted me to. I did not take the manor. I did not destroy Eleanor. I simply stopped letting them build their dignity on top of mine. Rebecca said something to me the day the payoff cleared. Justice and revenge are not the same thing. I nodded. I know. And I did. Revenge would have been wanting them homeless. Justice was making them face the paper they signed and the child they hurt. By spring, Sadie finished a new version of her family tree project. This one was for open house night at Maple Ridge Elementary. She added me, Grace, her teacher, Ms. Foster, a neighbor who brought soup when I had the flu, even Rebecca. Drawn with a briefcase and very serious eyebrows, the space where Eleanor's name might have gone was not blank anymore. Sadie had written one sentence across it in purple marker. Family is the people who choose you. I stood in that bright classroom surrounded by construction paper, glue sticks, and parents taking pictures, and felt something inside me finally unclench. Later that evening, Sadie and I walked home under a sky, turning pink over Greenwich. She held my hand and swung it gently. "Mom? Yeah? Do you think our family is big enough?" I looked down at her. For once, I did not have to search for the right answer. "Yes, sweetheart, I do." She smiled, a full smile this time, the kind I had not seen since before Christmas Eve when we reached our front door. She ran ahead and opened it herself. Light spilled out from our little hallway. Not a manor, not a legacy house, not a place with portraits and rules and velvet ropes around belonging, just home. A door that opened because we lived there. A door no one could make my daughter stand outside of. So if you have ever been made to feel like you had to earn a place in someone's family, or if someone you loved was treated like they did not belong, I hope you remember this. You do not have to keep paying emotionally, financially, or spiritually to hold open a door that was never meant to welcome you. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is take your child's hand, walk away quietly, and build a new doorway of your own. If this story resonated with you, share where you're watching from and tell me, have you ever had to choose dignity over belonging? I read your comments, and your stories matter here.